What happens to the heroes who don't get a comeback? Not the ones with Disney Plus cameos or multiverse variants. I'm talking about the real castaways. Characters Marvel pushed hard once, only to bury under decades of reboots, rebrands, and even tie-ins. Heroes who are weird, messy, maybe ahead of their time. Heroes that meant something, until they didn't. But here's the thing, a lot of those characters make more sense now than they ever did. They reflect the themes we actually care about today. Trauma, redemption, identity, the tension between power and control. In other words, they're exactly the kind of heroes that should be getting attention right now, if Marvel had the guts to bring them back right. So today, I'm looking at 5 forgotten Marvel characters. Not jokes, not nostalgia bait, who deserves a second shot. Not because they're retro, but because they're relevant. There's a special kind of silence in the 90s back issue bins, the kind that hums like static. You flip past the chromium covers, past the trading card inserts and faded promises of the next big thing, and then you see him. That hollow visor, those wings, that name, Darkhawk. You don't remember what he did, you just remembered how he looked, because that's all he ever really got, a look. Myth of a hero designed to be cool first, coherent second. But beneath the armor and the bad branding, there's a tragedy no one ever finished telling. A story about disassociation, body horror, and a boy turns himself off to survive. Chris Powell was a teenager whose life imploded the moment he saw his father, a New York cop, take a bribe. That's when he found the amulet in an abandoned amusement park. Of course, because if you're going to rewrite your DNA with ancient alien tech, it might as well happen between rusted roller coasters and old hot dogs. When Chris activated the amulet, his body just didn't get a power-up, got erased. It was replaced by a biomechanical assassin, an alien weapon with talons and plasma claws, and no sense of restraint. His human form got stuffed into a void like a coat in a locker. Every transformation was a little death. Every return was a little more confusing. He'd wake up after fights not knowing what happened. There were gaps in time, gaps in memory, gaps in identity, and he kept going back. Darkhawk wasn't just a superhero name, it was a coping mechanism, a survival instinct wrapped in techno-organic armor. He told himself that he was helping people, but really, he was just choosing not to be Chris Powell anymore, because being Chris Powell hurt too much. In the 90s, Marvel didn't quite know what to do with that. They tried to sell Darkhawk as a hybrid, part Spider-Man, part Iron Man, part Punisher-like. Teamed up with the New Warriors, guest starred in big crossovers, and even got a mini-event of his own. He had the branding, he had the hype. What he didn't have was a story that into how messed up it all was. Cause under the hood, this wasn't a clean superhero origin. It was a trauma narrative. Boy swapping his identity for a killing machine again and again, cause the real world was scarier than the alien one. Darkhawk wasn't a hero who saved the day. He was a kid using alien tech to disappear from himself. And that plays very differently today, because the questions that Darkhawk raises about losing your identity, about trauma rewriting you from the inside out, about vanishing into armor because it's easier than facing reflection, those are modern questions. Questions about anxiety, technology, what happens when we're forced to become something colder just to keep going. Marvel tried to reboot the concept in 2021 with a new character, Connor Young, a team with MS, who becomes the new Darkhawk. There were good ideas there, real potential, but it was sanitized, streamlined, it missed the rot and confusion that made the original story sting. What Darkhawk needs isn't a reboot, it's a descent. Something that takes the bones of the character and tells the story as it was always meant to be told. A cosmic psychological horror that looks like Akira, feels like Tetsuo the Iron Man, and sounds like every teenage scream trapped behind a metal mouthpiece. He's not Marvel's Batman, he's not even Marvel's Nova. He's the boy who looked at his broken life, found a monster inside himself, and said, yes, this is better. And if that's not a story worth finishing, I don't know what is. Sleepwalker first appeared in Sleepwalker #1 in June of 1991, created by Bob Budansky and Brett Blevins. He hails from the Mindscape, a bizarre, surreal dimension that exists parallel to human dreams, a place where nightmares roam free and reality twists in unsettling ways. Sleepwalker's mission is to patrol this strange realm, stopping monstrous entities from escaping into the human subconscious, and sometimes into the waking world itself. Basically, he's like a dream janitor for your nightmares, except with way cooler powers and way less union support. The character's origin isn't just weird, it's rooted in a deliberate challenge to how we defined heroism. As Budansky once explained, Sleepwalker came from a thought experiment tossed around during an editorial meeting. If Superman really existed, would the world actually welcome him? Or would nations unite against this near omnipotent alien out of fear, regardless of how noble his actions were? That line of questioning led to something even deeper. What if this alien wasn't a clean-cut all-American jawline, but looked truly alien, insectile, bug-eyed, almost monstrous, and still acted as a hero? Would people still accept him? That was the seed of Sleepwalker, the anti-Superman. Instead of coming from another planet and blending in perfectly with humanity, he came from an entirely different dimension. Instead of being adored on sight, be feared. But Dansky tied this idea to dreams, another subject that fascinated him at the time, and placed his alien protector in the one place where our deepest fears live, the sleeping mind. Originally, he wanted to name the character Alien, but the 1979 film made that a legal non-starter. So Sleepwalker was born, a being of nightmare, not because he causes them, but because that's where he has to live. The story really kicks off when Sleepwalker bonds with Rick Sheridan, an ordinary man who just wants a normal life, but instead finds himself sharing his mind and body with a literal monster from another dimension. This creates a constant internal tug of war. Rick's dreams become a portal, and every time he falls asleep, Sleepwalker comes out to do battle with threats, both physical and psychological. It's like having a guardian angel who lives in your head and looks like a sleep paralysis demon. Sleepwalker's powers are as strange as his origin. He can phase through walls, reshape his form, generate energy blasts and force fields, and warp physical space. But his real strength is thematic. His powers reflect the rules of a place that isn't bound by reality. The Mindscape doesn't play by Earth's logic, and neither does Sleepwalker. His battles feel more like dream sequences than action sequences, full of distorted geometry, shifting identities, and monsters born from human fear. Despite the originality, the comic only ran for 33 issues. It wasn't a failure, but it was a weird fit for the early 90s, where Marvel was riding high on flashy anti-heroes, mutant drama, and oversized guns. Sleepwalker didn't fit neatly into any of that. He was too introspective for the action crowd, too horror-tinged for younger readers, and too obscure to get the marketing push he needed. He faded away, not because the character lacked depth, but because he came out in the wrong decade. But now, Sleepwalker's time might be finally here. With Marvel leaning hard into supernatural and psychological storytelling, the space is finally wide open for a character who blends horror and heroism. Sleepwalker brings something genuinely different to the table. Not just another cape-wielding wisecracker, a surrealist nightmare guardian caught between worlds. And his story hits differently today. The idea of sharing your mind with something alien, wrestling with an unseen presence that others can't see, lines up with the modern cultural focus on mental health and identity. Rick Sheridan's experience feels like a metaphor for anxiety, disassociation, or trauma. The monsters he faces may be supernatural, the fear they tap into is painfully human. Sleepwalker is a character with rich potential, guarding the boundary between dreams and waking life, a shadowy protector in a world where the real and unreal blur. He may have been a misfit in the 90s, but now he's right on time. Stingray first showed up in Tales to Astonish number 95, way back in September of 1967. Created by Roy Thomas and Bill Everett, the same Bill Everett who co-created Namor and the Submariner. And yet, while Namor swaggers through Atlantis with the confidence of a half-naked sea monarch, Stingray has always been more of a quiet background presence. Which is wild, because the guy has a red and white armored wetsuit, go toe-to-toe with Atlanteans, and literally works for the US government as an oceanographer. Basically, if Iron Man got really into marine biology and never got invited to cool parties. Stingray is Dr. Walter Newell, a scientist who designed his own powered diving suit to study the ocean depths, and naturally ended up getting dragged into superhero chaos. Over the years, he's crossed paths with Namor, the Avengers, the Defenders, and even joined up with various incarnations of Heroes for Hire. But he's never really gotten his own story. He's the guy that shows up when someone needs a ride in a submersible, or a fight in Mariana Trench. That's not a diss, it just means Marvel's been sleeping on him for decades. What makes Stingray compelling isn't just that he's a C-lister with a cool costume, which his costume is, let's be honest, a crisp piece of 1960s design that still looks good today. It's that he represents a whole unexplored part of the Marvel universe, the ocean. Sure, Namor's been hogging the underwater spotlight for years, but he's royalty, arrogant, angry, and always ready to flood Manhattan when someone hurts his feelings. Stingray, by contrast, is a civilian, a scientist, a guy who wants to understand the deep, not rule it. That opens up a ton of potential for reinvention. While Namor plays king, Stingray could be Marvel's eco-hero, someone working on the edge of human knowledge, facing threats from the ocean itself. You want body horror? Try deep-sea mutations. You want metaphysical terror? Explore the Abyss as a gateway to cosmic horrors. There's room here for the Abyss, the Thing, Sphere, and Godzilla, all to exist in the same weird wetsuit. And let's be honest, In a media landscape full of recycled heroes, Stingray is untouched clay. He doesn't come with baggage, you don't have to fix anything. Just take the idea, an oceanographer with high-tech armor and a sense of duty, and drop him into a story that treats the ocean not as a set piece but a world of its own. Something vast, hostile, and deeply strange. So why was he forgotten? Partly because Marvel didn't know what to do with him. He was introduced as a Namor side character and never got a solo title. He doesn't quip like Spider-Man or brood like Wolverine, and let's face it, being a scientist in a wetsuit doesn't exactly scream extreme in the 1990s. Now that we're past the era of shoulder pads and energy swords, Stingray's time may finally be here. If Marvel is serious about expanding its universe into new corners, and not just making the city-level hero stories with a different coat of paint, then a grounded oceanic techno-horror or eco-thriller story would be a breath of fresh, salty air. Stingray doesn't need to be a household name, he just needs a story that lets him swim. First appearing in 2001, A Space Odyssey number 8, in July 1977, Machine Man was created by Jack Kirby at his most unfiltered and sci-fi obsessed. Originally named X-51, he's a synthetic being designed as part of a government experiment in artificial life. Unlike his mechanical siblings, who all malfunctioned or self-destructed, X-51 developed a personality, a mind of his own, thanks to being raised by a kind human scientist who treated him like a son. That little twist turned him into something unique, a robot trying to live like a man in a world that doesn't trust machines. And that right there is Machine Man's whole thing. Constantly walks a tightrope between cold logic and messy emotion, trying to carve out a life for himself while also stretching his arms across rooftops and shooting lasers from his fingers. Machine Man has a weird, uneven history. He's been a stoic outsider, a dry-humored government agent, a punchline in Next Wave, and a techno-noir loner. Writers can never quite agree on whether he's the tragic Pinocchio, a sarcastic cynic, or a malfunctioning oddball, which is exactly what makes him so adaptable. He's not one flavor of robot, he's a full buffet of repressed emotions and weaponized limbs. What keeps him relevant is how weirdly current he always feels. In a world grappling with AI ethics, identity, and surveillance, Machine Man is basically Marvel's walking metaphor for what makes someone real. He's constantly asking whether he's just lines of code in a metal frame or something more. Soul trapped in circuitry. If you've ever talked to a chatbot and felt slightly uncomfortable, congratulations, you've already engaged with the Machine Man theme. And unlike characters like Vision or Ultron, who are often weighed down by Shakespearean self-importance or global genocide schemes, Machine Man has a more grounded, almost punk sensibility. He's not trying to save the world or wipe it clean, he's just trying to find his place in it. That makes him way more relatable than your average android god. So, why did he get forgotten? Part of it is timing. Machine Man was born in the aftermath of 2001: A Space Odyssey, a licensed comic that nobody really quite knew how to follow up. His solo series had a strong start but never caught fire, and later appearances tended to be side gigs. Guest spots in bigger books, moments of comic relief, or a cameo filler for robot-themed issues. In a universe full of flashy heroes and angsty mutants, a thoughtful robot with telescoping limbs and trust issues just wasn't a top priority. Today, Machine Man could be more relevant than ever. He's a built-in lens for exploring AI, technological dependence, digital personhood, and all of that without rebooting your entire universe or needing 3 movies of backstory. You can play him straight or surreal, as comedy or tragedy, and it still all works. He's the ghost in Marvel's machine, and it's about time they turned him back on. There's nothing flashy about the name Justice, and maybe that's the point. Vance Astrovik first appeared in Giant Size Defenders number 5 in July 1975, created by writer Jerry Conway and artist Don Head. Originally introduced as Marvel Boy, he wasn't a god or an alien, just a regular teenager who suddenly developed telekinetic powers after a surreal encounter with his own future self, Major Victory. It was a classic Marvel setup, cosmic weirdness, human fallout. He resurfaced in a major way in New Warriors number 1 in 1990, where his character took a dramatically darker turn. When Vance, still operating as Marvel Boy, accidentally killed his abusive father with a burst of uncontrolled telekinetic power in New Warriors, he didn't run, turned himself in. He accepted a manslaughter charge, stood trial, and was actually sent to prison. That decision defined him. Vance wasn't a cautionary tale. He was a teenager who believed in moral responsibility, even when it meant destroying his own future. After serving his sentence, he re-emerged with a new name, Justice. He slowly earned back the right to be a hero, and eventually became a full-fledged Avenger in Avengers Volume 3, issue number 4. Powers, telekinetic flight, force-filled, concussive blast, gave him a presence in a fight. What really made him powerful was his emotional resilience. Most teen heroes get stories about finding themselves. Vance's story was about losing himself, breaking down completely, and doing the brutal public work of rebuild. So, why did Marvel forget about it? Again, timing, just as the 90s superhero boom began to crash. New Warriors lost steam, and Vance got quietly shuffled into supporting roles. Avengers the Initiative, Avengers Academy, the occasional cameo, writers stopped digging into his trauma. Instead of continuing his growth, he was relegated to generic team guy status, while flashier, edgier characters took the spotlight. And yet, that's exactly why he matters now. Today's audiences, especially younger ones, are drawn to characters who reflect the messy, non-linear process of personal growth. Justice is a survivor of both external abuse and internal failure. He didn't get a magic reset button. He had to work through the pain, guilt, and social judgment, all while trying to stay heroic. His powers are more than just spectacle. They're metaphors for emotional restraint, the fear of losing control, and the need to protect others even when you can't protect yourself. When Vance's emotions spike, so do his abilities. A shattered mind can turn his telekinetic into a force of destruction, but a focused one, it becomes a tool for rebuilding himself and the world around him. Justice isn't just a forgotten B-lister. He's a character whose very existence is built on the themes of accountability, resilience, and post-traumatic growth. Things that resonate now more than ever. In a media landscape obsessed with legacy heroes and multiversal spectacle, Justice is something rare. A flawed, grounded human being trying to do better. He doesn't represent perfection, he just represents progress. And that makes him a hero we need again. Marvel has no shortage of characters, but not every story needs to be multiversal or world-ending to mean something. Sometimes the most compelling heroes are the ones who fell through the cracks, the ones who are forgotten, not because they failed, but because the industry changed and left them behind. Darkhawk, Sleepwalker, Stingray, Machine Man, and Justice. They weren't perfect, that's exactly what makes them feel human. They represent ideas that are more relevant now than when they were created. Identity, trauma, surveillance, environmental collapse, healing, second chances, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop chasing nostalgia for the same old faces and start asking what else the Marvel Universe still has to say. So here's my question to you. Which of Marvel's forgotten heroes do you think deserve another shot? Did I miss your favorite? Should we dig even deeper next time? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video, why not subscribe or give it a like? Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.